Okay. As a preliminary matter, this is Veronica Bolchik, Chair of the Council for Human Services. Today is Thursday, June 13th, and it is 4:05 p.m. Please help me confirm that all members or persons anticipated on the agenda are here and can hear me. So members, when I call your name, please respond. We've got Sue Minthinen here, right? Suzanne Keating here, all right? And we've got Tara Risteri online and
Present.
Claudia Valle.
I think she
Oops.
Claudia. Oh, there we go. Oh, but
Can't hear you, Claudia.
Maybe she doesn't know. Let me ask her to
Okay.
unmute.
Well, we're working on that, and we've got Amanda Wright.
Sorry, the traffic is awful.
Okay, if you just say here.
Oh, here.
Claudia, can you hear us? Okay, she's
Yeah.
frozen.
Let's,
Seems to be frozen now.
we
Okay.
have quorum. We can get her confirmation. A little.
Okay, and Veronica Bolchik here. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Jericho Melee.
Here.
And we do have a speaker on our agenda from Riftelis, Emily. And if I pronounce your name not properly, is it Uselton?
It's Usselton, but thanks.
Usselton.
Yes. Yeah.
Usselton. Usselton. Okay. So
It
we
doesn't
have,
really make sense. Long U makes more sense. So I'm with you. I get
Usselton.
Usselton most often.
all righty. So good afternoon. This is an open meeting of the Council for Human Services. It's being conducted via hybrid according to Chapter 20, Acts of 2021. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting, I don't believe we'll have any public comment. I don't see any. And we are being video recorded. And I believe that's really all that I need to say on this long script. So we have established a quorum. So the next item on the agenda is public comment. And seeing no public here, we shall go on. I do realize that there was something left off of our agenda. We are not approving, there's nothing here to approve the agenda. So,
Take that as read here, and I will add that for next.
say it again.
Take that as read here. I believe you can have approve agenda. You know what? Let's skip over that part at this point. We can approve the agenda at the next meeting.
Okay, alrighty. And I apologize for that. It slipped by,
Got it.
but we will make that correction for next month. So we are on to our guest for the day, Emily Usselton. I want to say one of that long U, Usselton. And she is a manager at Riftelis. And I believe that, I'm not sure if everyone that is present had the opportunity to meet, but they were here last month.
Yeah, a little over a month ago, end of April.
Over a month ago. And we have asked representation with Emily to be here to give us a high level view of where we are with the study. So I will turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you all. Good afternoon. It's great to be with you. I have a very brief presentation to kind of guide our discussion, and then really we'll open it up for any questions you have about the study. And some of the faces, as Veronica mentioned, look familiar. So it was good to be on site and talking with a few folks about a month ago. So let me see if I can figure this out here.
I just set you as co-hosts. You should be able to share screen if necessary.
Okay. Can you all see that?
One moment, it's still coming through.
Okay.
There.
There we
All
go.
right. Awesome. Now let's see if I can actually advance slides. All right, it looks like we're moving along here. So just wanted to give you a brief introduction, myself and the firm, and then talk you through the process for this particular study and kind of what the different project roles are and where we are in the timeline of the study. So first, a lot of words on this slide. Really wasn't sure if some of you may know Raftellus, some of you may not. We actually have a kind of a long-standing relationship with the town of Nantucket. They're one of, we can't say our favorite clients, but we've done a lot of work for the town. Julia Novak has sort of been the face of Raftellus with the town. She had a client obligation tonight, so I apologize you're stuck with me because she's much more entertaining and humorous than I am. But by way of introduction, Raftellus is a firm that sort of specializes in local government and public sector utility work. That's our bread and butter. That's the type of consulting that we prefer to do. It's our niche, if you will. This gives you a suite of kind of all the different services we offer. But for Nantucket specifically, our relationship began in 2018 with a townwide staffing analysis, and then we've sort of grown the suite of services that we've partnered with the town in since that time. Probably the most well-known is the strategic planning facilitation process. So we've worked quite a bit with the select board through the years, facilitating and having conversations around the strategic plan, and then also helping town staff around the research, around the resourcing and the budget development aspects of the strategic plan. This year, you all have engaged us to assist in the review of the Human Services grant process, which is what we'll talk about a little bit more today. We're also doing some work with your communication staff. So kind of touching different aspects of the firm and kind of where we provide services and partner with local governments like yourself. The team for this particular study is led by Julia. Like I mentioned, she's very familiar with the town, sort of began the relationship back in 2018, was on site with me at the end of April to conduct some of our stakeholder interviews as part of the initial kind of understanding the context aspect of this project. I have also been involved from the beginning, and one of my colleagues, Claire Pritchard, is assisting us with a lot of the analysis, benchmarking, and survey review that's part of the study as well. So really quickly, our process before we get into the specifics of this study is really intended to be holistic. So we engage folks. We really think that the analytics side is best complemented by having good conversation. And so often we will interview a wide variety of stakeholders to really understand the context of the particular study or issue that we've been asked to kind of come in and provide some assistance for. And then we'll complement that, or we'll round that out with our understanding of kind of industry practices, best practices, norms, what might be going on in the region or with some of your peers, as well as any other kind of analytic or survey design, in this case, data that can complement or augment the conversations that we're having. And we'll pull all of that together and really provide, at the end of the study, a detailed report for the town that looks at sort of the important context and understanding and history of the Human Services grant process, blends together our conversations and our analytics to provide recommendations that we think best position the town to make the most of this program that is so advantageous for the community. And so specifically for this study, we've kind of four main objectives, and we're about midway through. So we began kind of late winter, early spring with sort of the contextual understanding. We held a kickoff meeting with town staff, developed an initial kind of data and document request, which is pretty standard for a study like this, policies, procedures, bylaws, et cetera. And then we conducted interviews with both town staff and a sampling of the different governing bodies that are tied to this particular grant process. So we talked with select board members, members of the finance committee, some of you all on the Council for Human Services, and some of the contract review committee members. We were not able to talk to everyone, but we feel like we had a really good mix of each of those different governing bodies and their perspectives that is useful for this particular project. And then alongside that, around the same time, we also did a lot of kind of the analytical work. So we developed a preliminary draft process map that just lays out who the key stakeholders are and what the steps are in this process every year of determining what amount of funding is going to be allocated for human services grants and what the process is to actually receive that funding and then be under contract and report on the use of that funding over an annual period. We've also conducted an applicant survey. So we went back and you have a great historical funding and application data source. So we went back several years and offered a online survey to applicants. So both folks that have received funding and those that have applied for funding, but maybe not received it in the past. There was, I think, 24 organizations in total. The survey was available mid-May through the end of May, so about two and a half weeks. And we received 17 responses from 14 different organizations, and almost every organization that we received response from is a recent recipient of grant funding. So we felt like that was a pretty good response rate. And so we're working through kind of analyzing the results of that survey right now. And then we also did a benchmarking review, which can be really helpful sort of information. But also, we sort of want to table it with the unique aspect of how the town of Nantucket views this particular program and process. So we think it's relevant and will be part of the study and part of the final report, but also sort of rounded out by both the conversations and some of the other analytical work that we're doing. The benchmarking communities included Mashpee, Provincetown, Harwich, Falmouth, and then Greenwich, Connecticut. So that was sort of determined with the town staff at the onset or the early stages of this particular study. And so we kind of talked with them directly if we were able to get a hold of them, and then also pulled down some of their public information, public budget documents, or kind of any policies and procedures they had out there that we could look at and sort of compare process notes and how they administer a similar program to what you all have. And so that brings us to where we're at right now. We have a lot of information. We've got notes from talking with a lot of folks. We've got survey results and benchmarking analysis, and we're really kind of pulling all of that together at the moment to really understand the context and then develop then preliminary sort of observations and recommendations for how we would prioritize moving forward for this particular program and process. So the goal is to present those preliminary obs and recs to the town staff late summer here, so in the next kind of month or two, and then shortly after that, provide the kind of the full context and the full detail of the draft report. Town staff will then have the opportunity to kind of provide comment and feedback on the draft report before we finalize it and make it sort of available, I think, publicly and to each of the committees and governing bodies that were involved in the process. Part of the report will also, this is sort of standard for any of our organizational assessments, will include like an implementation roadmap. So there will be several recommendations likely as part of the report. And what we try and do is sort of tier those or provide what's most important to focus on now and what's more medium term and what are things that will just take perhaps a lot more effort, coordination, or have some obstacles that may extend the timeline, but are still important to keep in mind and work towards. So there'll be some kind of prioritization around the recommendations that we provide as well. As I kind of mentioned, going through the timeline, there were a lot of participants and roles involved in this study, which was purposeful and intentional, as you all might anticipate. So first, obviously, is the town project staff. So we work closely with Jericho and his team, the town manager, and some of the other administrative leaders, including the finance director, just sort of understand the process administratively within the town. And they're sort of our primary point of contact as we move through the study and share kind of where we're moving in the analysis recommendations and then report and deliverable phase. We've also engaged both of the direct committees yourselves, the Council for Human Services, as well as the CRC folks, to sort of participate in the interview process, make sure they have the opportunity to share information about how they interact, what needs and challenges exist, where do they see opportunities for improvement in the policies and procedures, and have done most of that work to date. The same is true for the Select Board and Finance Committee, maybe a little bit different perspective. They're sort of zoomed out from the process a little bit more. but still ask about how they may interact with it and what they see as sort of the needs and challenges related to this particular program. And then finally, we've engaged, as mentioned, the grant applicants through the survey process. So they've had the opportunity to provide their input around kind of overall perceptions of the process and workload associated with kind of applying for and administering or being selected to receive some of this grant funding. So as far as next steps, we are kind of curating all the good information that we have and in the process of developing the preliminary observations and recommendations. So we anticipate sharing that initial draft with town staff, again, by the kind of end of summer, early fall, and then finalizing the report. Certainly, I think by the early fall, as Jericho and I work through the timeline, really trying to make sure that you all were equipped with what the results of the study were moving into budget funding and allocation and the meat of some of the review committee's work that happens kind of late fall and early winter. And with that, I'll stop sharing screens and just open it up for any questions you may have.
Questions?
I mean, to make a comment, actually, I mean,
Okay.
Tara,
Yes.
I would actually say that the questions that I had, actually, you answered as you were presenting, so thank you.
Welcome.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, I have a couple, all right. And I'm not sure if this is Emily or Jericho, probably together.
I'll default to Emily first, just because you know
Okay.
where I live.
I'm looking at the calendar. And I know that time is ticking and under the way we've been operating, if I go from the end results, which is grants being approved and recommendations sent to the Finance Committee and Select Board, that happens in February. Are we?
You're worried about whether or not we're.
Yes.
back.
The timeline is scary, yeah.
So, I'm gonna, like, the analysis will be done when the analysis is done. I think it's important for us to get a complete and effective picture of this, but I will have a draft that I can maybe plan ahead a little bit. My initial thoughts on this year's contract review cycle is that we would not be altering the RFP. We'll use more or less the same one that we used last year with the rubric information and so on in it. And that we would start that process, like we would have some meetings because we also have a new procurement platform we have to use through finance. So I would have us do some internal education in September or early October. And then by then we should have the final report and the roadmap. If we have the initial RFP out and available, and then I have some office hours to talk about any potential recipients and be kind of trying to maybe, like, I don't know if we'll have a full letter of intent process together before we launch this year. But I think that considering last year we had to do a whole youth behavioral health grant application process, I think we're in better shape. There's just going to be the two grants over the same time cycle or possibly slightly staggered. But it's going to depend on the final report. So it's a little hairy, but I think we're in better shape than we were last year. And I think that we have some of the basics that we needed, we'll have before the start of this cycle. So hopefully we'll be able to onboard whatever the recommendations are as we get them. Back to my metaphor of the changing the tire on the bike as we ride.
So what I'm hearing you say is that going into 2026 applications, we may be doing it hybrid.
Yeah.
Okay, meaning some old, some new, and as you say, changing the tires as it's going down the road.
It's gonna have to depend on when the report gets done. if it gets done, so if we have a final report in end of, like, if we have a final report, like, by end of August, traditionally, we don't start the process until towards the end of September, so I think that should be okay. I can't be sure we have to do a grant cycle. If we don't have the report in its total before we start, then we'll use as close to the last year's cycle as we can. Or last year's policies and procedures as we can, with just the addition of the procurement software platform. So, yeah, I mean, and
I was gonna say, I would offer kind of two things. One is the August timeline of reviewing preliminary obs and regs. We've been sort of discussing this with Jericho and town staff along the way. So I don't want to give the illusion that I guess what I would say is that will probably move quickly, right? So we want the opportunity. It looks like August will be our best chance to really have an in-person conversation with the key members of town staff around where we're landing with the study. But I anticipate then, kind of as we build consensus or fine tune based on their feedback, and turn to final, that would move quickly. So, when we started the project, we knew end of August, kind of to early to mid-September was the sweet spot, and we're still in line and kind of on target to be able to provide a report at that point. So, we're doing all the legwork now to really be able to sort of turn quickly. Part of it's just the logistics, as you know, of kind of making sure there's an opportunity to have a good conversation with each of the folks in town staff. And then the other thing I would offer is what will help is that implementation roadmap. So as you begin kind of year one post-study, we certainly can appreciate some of the hurdles and logistics around some of the recommendations. So we will have that in mind when we develop the roadmap, so that some of the maybe higher tiered priority ones are ones that might be, the low hanging fruit, or things that you could move on a little bit quicker. And some of the other ones are ones that you'll want to start planning in more of kind of a, 2 to 3 year horizon, because it may require some level of coordination among a lot of the different governing bodies, commissions, et cetera, depending on what the recommendation is. So I think that's a good point, and hopefully the report will be in sync with sort of the ability to move on certain recommendations quickly versus other ones needing a little bit more of a complete cycle or thought process around how to begin implementing.
And I'm going to ask Sue to help me on this one, because one of the two factors here. Last night, attending the select board meeting, and Jericho did a very high level of the entire process with the Human Services Department. And during comments at the end of the presentation, the chair of the select board basically stated that our funding that we've had for town grants has remained static for a number of years. And it's recognized on an anecdotal basis that we need more because of growing population, complexity, all of the above. But it also was, what I heard is that until this entire process is done and we're moving forward, they're hesitant on making additional recommendations. Did I hear that properly?
that was the subtext I got from that.
Okay,
I think the youth behavioral health grant kind of catalyzed that response to a certain extent. And frankly, I understand why they made that decision. But I firmly believe that the needs are higher than the grant, than the funding allocation. But I am hesitant to say how much more.
Right. Right.
And I very much, I do not like assuming I know what is going on. I want to have things to measure and analyze whether or not we need what that actual relationship is. But I also think that when we need a much more concise and transparent and efficient process, just because there's a lot of moving parts, there's a lot of places that this funding can go, and there's a lot of goods, services, advocacy, and education that can come out of this. And there is no perfect grant process. So if we build in steps to measure what we're doing, it'll only get better. And then also it does make it much easier to request increases of money when you can benchmark to other municipalities with demographic similarities. You can actually try and figure out a way to have requests factor into what your demand is, because as it's configured now, they're not a great indicator of what the actual need is. And then, responsible funding should enable additional funding is how I think of it. So that's sort of my 2 cents on that.
Okay. Tara?
A question related to what you just mentioned, which is in part of the process when you were benchmarking, did you look at grant, not just amounts, but because it's obviously going to be different for every municipality, but did you look at increases? Were there trending increases, decreases, or was it also static? Did you look at that?
We did. We looked at basically per capita allocation to normalize it or to make it comparative across, varying sizes of localities. And then, we considered sort of the demographic characteristics of each of the peer communities first, and then looked at specifically the funding piece. But I will say, most of the report in our analysis is really process focused to what Jericho mentioned. Ultimately, the town's ability to resource this and the policy decisions around that are what, you all are doing each and every day. And what we're looking at is the longstanding process that exists, and what are the opportunities to sort of build that or streamline that in a way that's best suited to meet the town's kind of overarching objectives and goals of why it exists. So I guess I say that to say, I can appreciate maybe that some of the commentary last night was, this study is underway, and so resourcing decisions are sort of maybe on hold or pause as a result of the study. What I would just offer is that, our study is not going to be focused on what's the right amount that you should be funding, right? Our study is going to be process-based. And so keep that in mind, and that shouldn't slow down, if you have the ability to determine what the unmet needs are, move forward in that process. I agree with Jericho, and this is not unique to you all. It is incredibly difficult to measure unmet demand in a community for human services needs, right? And so there's a huge data limitation there that's not unique to Nantucket by any means.
Well, I would just ask and add a question of whether, when you're looking at the demographic allocations, I think one of the ways, at least that I'm processing this in my head as we're having the conversation, but looking at the percent of the population that is actually receiving services, right? And then using that allocation to understand the grant process for that. So, I would hope, and or just trying to think it through, if you have 28% of the population that are in need of services, and that growth changes, you would hope that year over year, if you started 5 years ago with 18% of the population, that increases and that increases, well, you would hope that allocation would increase accordingly. So I'm wondering if in that process of review, if you look at that too, not just the dollars, but the population need. Because that would be, to me, an argument back to the finance committee to say, year over year, the increase in need, you guys have been giving us the same amount of money, but the amount of people that are in need has increased year over year. Because I know from my perspective, in terms of these arguments, you got to go to the finance committee with numbers. So are you guys looking at, is that part of what you're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely in our underlying data. I like the way you framed it. So I think that's good feedback for us to sort of take back and think about. I mean, we have all of those data points, but that sort of trend-based analysis is interesting. We certainly thought about, just from an inflationary perspective, if you do inflation adjusted dollars, for anything right now, if it's been static in a budget process, as many of you know, then it really hasn't kept pace with the true cost and needs. So that's really good feedback, and we'll definitely take it back. I do think we have the underlying data that you're referring to, but I like the perspective.
Thanks. Okay, good.
So,
One question that came to mind is when you're creating the recommendations for different policy changes or procedure changes. I suspect that the town admin team will be open to the changes and want to implement them. Are there recommendations on creating buy-in for the council or the CRC that are the ones that will be having to change their procedures? Because I think we had, when my interview with you, we talked about, it's Nantucket is a very much, this is how we do it. And why would we change it? So I'm hoping that there'll be some help in creating buy-in.
I have one bit, which is that if we implement these recommendations, we can request more money, which I think is in everyone on those committees' best interests, because everyone on there does want to provide more services. So I think that's one, just on my end, that's one
Good carrot.
carrot, yeah. And then,
Yeah, I think the other would be that there's certainly an appreciation for the amount of layers involved in from a governing volunteer-based perspective of this process, and so that will be seeded into the recommendations, and so there will likely be recommendations that maybe are not as much sort of analytics or objective, that are more kind of building consensus, having conversation, those types of things, to say, let's have a fresh look at, or let's talk about some of these different areas to move forward, because we certainly learned through the interview process, really through our work with the town over the years, how integral, all of the different layers really are. And so I think we have an appreciation for that, and recommendations will sort of value that in terms of how we move forward. So some of them may be, bring the bodies together to talk about X or to talk about Y. It's just, again, in that tiering process, some of it will take a little bit longer view, but I think we'll be around kind of building the collaboration, the coalitions that are needed to really make the process the best that it can be, in the long run.
So I do believe education is key. Education of the town, town bodies, I should say, education of the committees, education of the grant applicants, all the way through. So I hope that is going to be included.
to the staff, like this,
Staff.
One of the reasons why I requested, one of the reasons I started initiating this process in the first place is because this is the first grant process I've ever run. So I wanted to double check my intuitions with, other municipalities and, experts in the field. So, we, town staff side also, we're going to benefit from this education a lot.
Okay. No more questions. This may be a segue into our next item on the agenda, because this is the Council for Human Services. And of course, today I am concerned of how this all is going to integrate into what we do and to be prepared for that. So the next item on our agenda is to review the CHS mission. Now, I don't know, Emily, if you would like to stay for this conversation, or if you're welcome to stay or to leave if you have other obligations.
You're muted as well.
I am muted. Yes, I was gonna say I will let you all discuss, because I know I can go back and watch it later to sort of hear. But I do appreciate the invitation. Yes, thank you very
Okay.
much, and it was a pleasure to be with all of you this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
She's
All right.
having like
Take care.
half our views on the town government YouTube page. It's half of it's coming through Ref Telus. So I
Okay.
guess, getting our analytics up. So let me.
Thank you very much, Emily. Yep.
I'm gonna grab the mission statement and throw it up on the share screen, just so we all know if that was a clip, if that's where you'd like to head with this.
Right. So that way Amanda and Tara can have it up in front of them. And is Claudia still with us?
So Claudia emailed me just a moment ago saying she's having connectivity issues. I told her to give it another try.
Okay.
But
we
I am
still have
not
quorum.
seeing- Yes, we still have quorum.
Okay. And Amanda, I have to apologize while he's doing this. My brain gets into, we're on task and, we were taking attendance when you were telling us about
Oh,
you.
sorry.
So I apologize for the abruptness.
geez.
We just need you to say here.
I texted Jericho and I was trying to come in person, but the traffic was too bad, so I apologize.
Traffic has been outrageous these past couple of days. It's
Well, just
Not even,
Yeah,
hang on to the end of August.
yeah.
well, the end of June, it's just crazy.
yeah.
I am gonna copy and paste this into a document that I will then share, just because that'll fit it all on one page. Oh, I thought it would fit it all on one page. Okay, I'm gonna share a screen. Let me know if you guys can see it. If you cannot, this is pulled from the. This is pulled from the web page, so you can find this by Googling Council of Human Services Nantucket, and it should take you right to this page, which has this just in a different section.
Yeah,
This
your version was very visible as well. So if you want the Word doc or whatever.
is this one. Is this one showing up?
That one's showing up, but I actually like what you cut and pasted better.
Oh, okay. So this is the cut and paste one, but let me put it in. I can actually do it the other way. This might make it easier because I can highlight it. Oops. Screen. That's the, oh no, so you guys are seeing the web page now, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we should all be looking at the same thing. I'm highlighting mission. We all seeing the same thing?
Right now I'm just seeing your blue screen, your background. You're not seeing a doc.
All right, let me try this again. Share services. How about now?
No, oh,
Oh, that's fine. And well, yeah.
Did you want the other one?
No, this is fine.
this is fine.
Okay.
Really fine.
So this document, starting from here, I believe, comes out of the charter. So this is the chartered mission and rights and responsibilities. In the actual town charter, there's some other bits and pieces, but this is the functional section here. This is the I guess aspirational mission, and these are the
Right.
rights and responsibilities below.
I don't know how best to tackle this because we have, as a group, looked at this
Yeah.
before, but I think, wanting to somewhat pull this process together as we look down the road, because the mission statement really does have what our role is in this process.
Right.
And in more recent years, we have not been following the mission statement. So,
I can provide a tiny bit of
Okay.
historical background.
all right,
So we used to have a human services department in the late 90s to early 2000s. There was a human service department here. When the economic downturn hit in 08, 09, the Human Service Department went away. I don't believe there was a Human Service Director for around a decade or so in that area. During that interval, the CHS was not able to appoint sufficient people to have a quorum, so it too went away. Whereas the Contract Review Committee continued to do its work without the
Oversight.
oversight and policy setting of the CHS. When Rachel, was she?
Oh, she's not day
anymore.
anymore, but
When the current director of Sherburne Commons
Right.
moved into the Human Services Director position, she ended up restarting parts of the process. But I don't believe it was until Brooke Moore initiated the Council for Human Services in, I think, like a year or two, like 1 year before
Pre-COVID.
COVID, immediately before COVID. And at that point, it was sort of reconfigured into a human services in like a outreach communication sort of thing. And the central mission of oversight on contract review and priority setting for human services, it really went away until last fall when Athelin brought it back up for discussion. So that's sort of the Cliff Notes, best I understand it, history of this this process, how we got here setting.
Okay.
Did that sort of help?
Yes, yes, and I'd like to just dig into the bullet points under the council shall, because that really is outlining, I believe, and I don't want to look into the crystal ball, but I think that what is outlined here will be potentially some of the recommendations that are going to be coming back from the study.
Yeah.
So it really is outlined here of developing and adopting policies for the operation and the operation of the contract review subcommittee. Such policies from time to time amended by the council, and developing, amending such policies. The council shall work with the director, council, assuming the Department of Human Services. Such policies of the council may address the activities of the council, which may include but not limited to.
I would suggest we pause for a second and look at this paragraph.
Okay,
I'm sorry, I don't mean to step on your toes.
no, that's quite all right.
So, to my mind, this paragraph means that the responsibility for assessing success of human service spending, and then the priority setting for human services spending is held by this committee. So because you are members of the community, and ideally we would have a representative body of community members, you would know the challenges and the problems facing the members of the community as well as anybody does.
Mhm.
So it would be up to the CHS to intake information from the contract review committee, and from your own experience, and from the Department of Human Services, and from the Division of Human Services now, and from any needs assessments or empirical measurements of what's going on the island. You would then set policy or priorities for spending, up to and including, things like apportioning money for particular uses and that sort of thing. The nature of CHS is that it should be removed from the nuts and the bolts of the RFPs. It should not be you guys digging through the quarterly reports necessarily, except for the members who are assigned to CRC. But it should be that you guys do the oversight, you do the lessons learned, and you do the evaluation of that year's efforts and whether or not those are working, what needs to be changed. In my head, you would be collaborating with the CRC on establishing a rubric for each year and using the rubric to weigh what your what the needs are, or what we're looking for in requests, or what we're looking for in services.
Yeah.
And then from then on, it would be CRC which implements those things.
Right. And just on that one point, having used the rubric this past cycle, and the rubric is part of the grant application, we need to review the rubric because that really drives decisions and comparisons, and
It should.
it should. And the
It's
rubric,
different than it did.
yeah,
It
the
should.
rubric this year was a start, but we found lots of holes. So before going forward, I want to make sure that that does get changed, because that point will help down the road with everything. So,
Agreed.
yeah,
So because of the nature of writing the grant agreements,
right,
I'm currently going to be writing the or I'm going to be tweaking the RFP for release, and I would like to make that release early so that everyone can do a solid job like that, so that it's a sufficient amount of time to do a robust, well-researched RFP. I would need that new rubric before I can release the RFPs. And I think that is because it needs to be for procurement and for agreement purposes. We need to have that in the RFPs that are released, because if you release a rubric that nobody knows that you're using, it doesn't help.
right. That's why it's part of the RFP.
Mhm.
Tara?
Yeah, so I have a question, and this is kind of a little bit about policy and power. The way that I read this in terms of what the council is to do is we're supposed to be developing and adopting policies for the operation of the CRC, of the Contract Review Subcommittee. It's a subcommittee, but when I look at the mission of the subcommittee, which I have on the right side of my screen, you can't see it, is to review, obviously the funding requests and so on and so forth, members including representation from the select board, finance committee. What I want to understand, or it begs the question from my perspective, if we are developing the policies for this for the contract review committee, why is it that someone from the council is not actually the chair of that committee? Because we're setting the policy, we are members of, but to me, if we're the ones setting the policy, then somebody from this group should actually be chairing and not just being a participating member. It seems like there's an imbalance of power in my mind.
Fantastic question.
Yeah, no, but I don't think that's ever been examined. That's never been
Yeah, I think it should be,
posed,
because with my experience is if we are the policy, if we are setting the policy, we should also have not quote unquote greater representation, but it should be guided by those, or at least an individual who came up with that policy that's then being implemented.
But maybe this is where I also view the role of Jericho as our administrator, because he is the administrator for the Council for Human Services and the Contract Review Committee. So that I somewhat see as part of your role in this.
So I absolutely agree, but part of this is from what I view my role in this is. My role is to make sure the process is properly administered and properly connected to the internal town structures, like the finance, like our munis system for releasing funds. All of that stuff is a big chunk of it. I need to be familiar with the meetings and the intent of all of the two bodies so that I can properly write grant agreements or assist with can I use money in this way as part of the grant questions that come
Right.
out of cycle for the meetings?
Mhm.
I should not be, and did we lose Amanda?
I think so.
We are not at
Or
quorum.
maybe her camera's off. I don't.
I do not see her.
Oh yeah, because right now, technically, I think I'm the only online participant.
You are. So we can continue without a quorum, but we cannot end this meeting officially. You'll have to be
Okay.
hanging until the next meeting.
Okay.
Um,
Do
Yeah.
you need to reach out, see, because she also may be on call.
this is, I did see her checking her phone initially.
So
She might have had to go for a meeting. I would
Okay.
suggest reaching out to her while we continue.
Yeah.
You also want to be mindful, you had a hard stop, you
Right.
had to be someplace at
I have to be
5:30.
somewhere at 5:30.
How far do you have to go?
I'm hoping to run home and then run over there, so
So to be,
for Main Street.
to be quite honest, we could talk about this for 4
Ever.
hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I
think-
just want to put it out there in the sort of the domain. Number one, I don't think Jericho should actually, I know what your role is in regards to both of these, but I think when we have individuals from the community at large that are actually not just members of, but chairing, I don't see you needing to be in the role of chair.
Right, right.
But I do find this to be a little, I think, I think it needs to be thought about maybe again.
Right.
The other,
I guess I look at it that we have members at large, we have appointees from this committee. And
Yeah,
we also have appointees from finance and, yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
So the way I look at it is each voice on that committee has a equal voice.
Yep.
Which is the way that it needs to be. So I need to think a little bit more of what you're presenting.
And I have a question
Yeah.
about that. If on this council is also a member of the CRCs too.
We are,
You too.
right?
yeah, it's Sue and Veronica.
Well, and I'm just
Yeah.
trying to think, like, if the select board members sit on other committees,
Yeah,
they're not necessarily chairing them.
right.
Does it matter?
so,
Sometimes they do, sometimes.
Yeah,
not.
so I don't know if there's a pattern to that.
so to my knowledge, there is no clear ruling on that. The other component of this is that the Council for Human Services can give instruction to and receive reports from the Contract Review Committee.
Yeah.
So that,
My sticking point is that the policies are being adopted by us, by the council. That the fact that their policies are adopted and then you sort of just have representation makes me, I just want to, kind of think on it a little bit.
Yeah,
I think the point about organizational structure and
Yeah.
follow through is a good and important one. I think it is important so I am of the opinion that a broad array of opinions, I'm of the opinion that a broad array of opinions is a better way to manage this. But the question of assigning priorities and ensuring that they're followed through by members of the subcommittees is one that needs to be discussed.
Yep.
I am of the mind that the CRC chairmanship is an enormous amount of work that is not clearly defined who does what. And my belief is that it needs to be split up amongst multiple people who serve on the Contract Review Committee.
Yeah.
I think that in no small way, that will address some of the issues by giving a kind of balance of power and not centralizing it in one individual.
Yeah, I think you're reading what I'm getting at a little bit because,
Well, and yeah, I think having the chair of the CRC, whoever that may be determined to be, should be reporting, should be attending our meetings during season.
Yeah.
Okay, I agree.
Instead of
Right.
relying on Veronica and I to speak on behalf of the group.
Yeah.
Right.
It feels like there should be, there is a reporting structure. We should have.
Yes.
Right.
So,
Two ways.
yeah.
Right.
And what I think is, especially during the in season, we'll call it, from September through, there should be regular updates, potentially written reports, just to give us a progress report. But a big chunk of this will be managed by increased structure.
Yeah.
We have X number of, if we have X number of meetings over Y timeline with a set of phases where we're in stage 1 now, and then stage 2 will be this process, and then written reports along the way for that, as well as, and I think this is the crucial part, is a year-end assessment of the value of the programs.
Absolutely.
The other major thing comes on the provider side. When we do education to the nonprofits coming to us for requests, we have to really centralize on whether or not we're funding organizations or if we're funding programs.
Programs, yeah.
And we need to move towards a program-based funding for this as opposed to
100%.
organizational.
Yeah.
I understand the historical precedent for how we got to this point, and I think we need to be careful to make sure we're not going to be harming the nonprofits that we're trying to support. And I think we also need to come to a place where it is genuine collaboration, not between other agencies, but between the contract review committee and the agencies. We need to be meeting them halfway. We need to be doing additional information. We need to be more transparent on when they're going to be called. We need to be providing just lots of little things that we need to do in order that will come from having an explicit structure and time plan for all of these things.
Yeah. And if I could comment, I mean, the funding of an organization doesn't necessarily mean that you're providing something to the individual who needs who has the need. And that's a problem. I agree with you. I just want to I don't want to fund somebody's organization to buy themselves new laptops. It should be programmatic so that the individuals that are in need are actually getting the funding to get what their needs are. So I think this and the year-end assessment, I think, is enormously important as well.
Right.
A big chunk of my thoughts on this came through the discussion we had with Greenwich. And the amount of time they spend interacting with agencies before anything is written, before any requests are in. That is, a huge difference in how this will go. And then I cannot stress this enough. I think that separating up the responsibilities explicitly so that they fall on multiple people in there, it will enormously improve that process. That's sort of that's my thought on it.
Yeah.
Will definitely change the makeup of the CRC and this group potentially as well.
I received
Yeah, I just got it also. Amanda has a crisis, so, yeah. All right, so moving forward, it is 5:03. I know that you need to be leaving.
I would
Do
suggest,
we table the rest of this?
well, we're gonna have to, because we can't. end
We
this
can't,
meeting.
we can't do, but what can we talk about our next meeting? Because we're now into July and August.
I think we're
and-
gonna need a meeting in July.
In July,
I mean, also, could you call, if possible, could you call, because there's so much to actually discuss here, could we call a special meeting before that?
We absolutely, we are not stuck to the once a month tempo.
Yeah.
Traditionally, we have met less frequently in the summer just because of the makeup of the board. At the same time, I really do think potentially the other way to do this is a work group, or two people working independently to kind of put together a tiny report on it. because that doesn't hit the deliberation limitations of open meeting law. And then additionally, I think there's a little homework we should be doing.
Yeah.
Which is sort of like to think about how this is going to work out. The unfortunate thing is that on my end, big changes in structure are going to have to be driven by this report, by the Raftellus report.
Yes.
It is very important that we have an external, impartial person doing this work for us. Because I think that I am potentially too close to a lot of it, and I don't have experience in other examples of this. So the only way I know is the way that we've been doing it.
Yeah.
But I think that we should have a July meeting. I think that we should maybe just talk about this and maybe some updates if there's anything.
Right.
Yeah, and I would argue because of the fact that Raf tell us that this process is ongoing right now and the timelines, frankly, in some ways are tight, that it behooves us as a council to actually, whether it's not July, but it's the end of the month, but I think it should be a priority for us to actually, address this and have this conversation sooner than later, because as you said, there's potential for a lot of change.
The other thing is this body can request changes or things outside of the not pending on the request. On the report, you guys know that there is a lot of change coming up. So that's the kind of thing that we don't need to wait on the report for that. Right.
Yeah, taking the temperature. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So do we want to keep our fourth Thursday in July, or do we want to try?
The fourth and the third.
We're third on this one is special, but traditionally we're meeting fourth.
Right.
Third Thursday, just as a heads up, is the most commonly requested time for meetings for town bodies. If at all possible, this is from Erica,
To the fourth.
second or fourth would be better.
Okay.
Fourth is better. I will float that in an email out, I do probably tomorrow. And I think that if you are the individual who would be making the decision, or co or vice, you guys are co, right?
Yeah.
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 So I think it's up to you guys about calling a special out of cycle meeting. If you know if that's the case,
Okay.
that's needed, we can definitely do that.
Okay. Well, let's, offline, let's talk about some dates, and best thing is if you then email and get a consensus.
So what I would suggest is that maybe early next week, we sit down or Zoom or however we want to do this for 15, 20 minutes and figure out if we think that's necessary.
Right.
My suspicion is at least one special meeting will be necessary. It may be after the June or the July meeting. Because I'll check in with Raftellus to see if I can when that draft is coming out, if I can use that to inform our time frame and sort of what's going to happen. We will not be able to release it outside of town staff until it's
Right.
finalized.
Right.
But if I get
We don't
the
have
clip
to-
notes.
We don't have to.
No, we're good.
No, you
And I
can
think
just-
actually it's probably good to stop here. We're starting to
Right.
drift off the actual point.
And
Right.
are we being recorded?
We
Yes,
are
we're
still.
still being recorded, so we can't end the meeting
Right.
because we don't have a quorum. So our next meeting, we have to end this meeting first and then start. Okay.
And we have to accept the agenda.
Yeah. Well, and let's do that.
Yeah.
Tamika should be getting the back minutes sorted out. That's been an issue just because of how much work she's doing. We will, by the end of next month, have a new staff member who will be responsible for this and for CRC. So we should have a little bit quicker time on that.
Okay,
I don't think we need to do anything from here, so I'm just gonna
Right.
move on.
okay, so we can just say goodbye.
It'll be the second longest meeting in CHS history.
Okay.
Well, just so you have just so you're aware, I would be very happy to get together sooner to discuss any of this. I think waiting 6 weeks for the next conversation about it,
It's a long time.
Yeah, agreed.
long time.
And we can have smaller meetings, or if necessary, we can post a work group type meeting
Yeah.
for a sub forum discussion.
Okay, all
All right, thank you very much, everybody.
right, thanks, guys. Bye.
Goodbye. All right.
Take care, Suzanne.
Yep, thank you. No, really seriously,